From my point of view, I'll just talk a little bit about my coaching profile, my philosophy, and then we'll talk through that coaching process and give you a few examples of what I've used in the past and with various teams, and then I'll lead that into an expectation from a team environment and a rugby environment, and then I'll finish with some individual stats and how that builds a profile of a player, and obviously then leads to IDPs or IPPs, depending on what words you use to develop that individual. So coaching profile was, as Owen said, I've been lucky enough to be coaching full time since 1990. I actually started off a little bit of mini rugby, but then I played a little bit of cricket as well in my younger days, and actually went to South Africa to live for a couple of years, where I was actually coaching cricket, primarily for 3 or 4 years. I then came back from South Africa and applied for a job with the IRFU, and was lucky enough to become a regional development manager. And for the next 25 years, I worked for the IRFU in various different guises, culminating in head coach of Ulster Rugby for 3 years. And obviously, from a playing point of view, I've played both sports, cricket and rugby, to the international level. So I'm very, very fortunate, to have that exposure, and I suppose been very lucky that I've been able to do something for a large portion of my life, and something I love, playing sport and obviously coaching sport. From a coaching philosophy point of view, what I want to try and do in the teams that I work with is give them a framework that they can make decisions in, and it's quite fluid. And I suppose I've been quite lucky with coaching for a long period of time. As a young coach, probably at the start, I was looking at more drills orientated. And as time went on, and as my analysis of games and what happened actually within rugby, I changed that process to sort of a little bit more games orientated, and trying to actually introduce structures that happened in the game, and allowed the players then to read those cues and read those scenarios a little bit earlier, so that they can make that decision-making process a little bit smoother for them. I think, as I said, because I've been in the game quite a long period of time, what you're trying to do as a rugby coach is have two options, and two sides to attack, and then you're trying to manipulate the defense into making decisions for you, and hopefully over a period of time, if you can work those scenarios through, those players start to see those cues and start to read that. And I suppose I've changed my philosophy over the period of time, and I was quite tell at the start, and then as we progress, I keep saying to the coaches that I work with in Campbell on a daily basis that we're trying to educate the players through the week, but they take the exam on a Saturday, and then we review that process at the early part of the next week, and then just build scenarios and build the education and understanding of the players that we work with. I suppose fundamentals is a big thing for me. The top end game and the elite end game, it's who can deal with the pressures of the game, and it's not about the flash stuff. It's about doing your basics really well, catch, pass, execution. It's massive, and it's trying to make sure that you've educated your players to keep their cool and just work on those fundamentals through the week, and it does take a period of time. I think through lockdown, obviously Michael Jordan on Netflix was pretty prevalent, and that's just a quote from him with regards to the fundamentals and how important he felt it was to him and his game. Leading on to that, practice through the week, is a key aspect for me. and I'll emphasize this to the players and the teams that I work with, that who you are in the competition floor is a reflection of who you are in practice. And it's I still even though I'm getting on in age, I would still train quite hard, and I put a lot of effort into that, and I want that to reflect to the players during the week. It's about what you put in. You put 100% into training, you're going to get a pretty good return at the weekends in your games, and and then it's about that reflection of the week, and how you can then take some of those learnings of the week and the game, and put them into development plans for the following week. That, as I said, my philosophy, I follow the NFL quite a bit, and the New England Patriots will be one of the teams that I'd follow quite closely. Bill Belichick and his coaching staff, and and there's plenty of documentaries on YouTube and stuff that you can have a look at and see how they run their program. And we actually used a little bit of this during the week, and know your job, understand your job, and execute your job. And I think from a club playing point of view, the early part of the week, the Monday and the Tuesday, was all about knowing your job, us explaining that and trying to teach the players. And then as the week went on, it was the Wednesday and the Thursday, and the Friday, it was up to them to understand their job. And then obviously at the weekend and game time, it was up to them to execute their job. So that's the process that we would have taken through, in the teams that I've worked with. This is just a simple framework, of that coaching process, and I'm through this sort of little diagram. I'll go through some examples as we go through the presentation. Ultimately, you got to have a goal. What you're looking to achieve at the end of the day. Whether that's a season goal or whether that's a little bit longer term. And I suppose it's all about analysis, and the reality there. It's trying to see where you are as a team. What factors and what parameters you're working to at the moment, how successful you are. And from a rugby point of view, we look at the game, set piece, attack, defense. Those are aspects that we do a lot of measurements with, from a team environment point of view. And I'll go through that in a little bit more detail. When you get that analysis done and you see where you are, you as a collective, coaches and as players, you got to come up with ideas on how you got to improve and avenues and structures that you want to lead into to try and achieve your goals and bring that success to the team that you're working with. And then obviously you got to have a little bit of buy-in. What are the players willing to commit to? And I understand there's, rugby has become professional over the last 25, 30 years. The club game, is obviously amateur. And I know Gaelic Games has had that fight and that thought process of, do they go pro? Do they not go pro? And the commitment that a lot of the players give, over a long period of time. Ultimately, in that coaching process, what you're trying to do is you're trying to change culture, and from my point of view, going into Belfast Harlequins over the last couple of years, they had a losing mentality, and it's been a short time frame, and what you're trying to do is trying to change the mindset and the culture of what has been there before. And I suppose this little video here sort of culminates in what you're trying to do as a coach. You're trying to build those foundations and trying to build that culture that the players or the coaches on the field, because ultimately you got to educate them well enough during the week, but they obviously play the game, and you got to try and make sure that they have got a good understanding of what you're trying to do, that so that they can, especially in the game that rugby and Gaelic is, it's quite fluid and it's very fast, and you're trying to make sure that they can make adjustments in the heat of battle and those split seconds, and that's what you're trying to do. I'll just play this.
as a coach, what was going through your mind?
Well, there's two things that happened. Ashton challenged Keldon, which you and I know as a coach, it's what you want. But then PJ challenged Ashton. That didn't go quite as well. But then I said to PJ, you fumbled the last rebound, almost cost us the game. Somebody should have gone on you. Would you have dealt with it? And I said, you got to be able to challenge each other and then laugh about it. As we went through it, the next day, Ashton was laughing at PJ. And then I said, that's how this is supposed to be. You're in the heat of the moment, man. We're trying to win. You got to do your job. And if you're not, I'm going to say something to you. If you're too cool, then don't be in the game. And it shouldn't come from the coach. A team that's empowered becomes that kind of team. We're still not quite there, but we're much better than we were. Not where we need to be, but way beyond where we were early in the year.
Like I suppose that little video clip culminates what you're trying to do as a coach. You know, you're trying to empower the players, you know, and you're trying to give them a framework that they can make really good decisions and bring success to the club or the team that you're working with. We all know that success sometimes is not a straight line, you know, and you know what you've got to try and get across to the players, you know, is they've got to trust the process, the coaching process that you're going through, you know, and sometimes you'll get some really good wins and sometimes you'll have some losses, and you know, it's all about reflection and trying to get better every training session and every game, you know, and like all coaches know, it takes a long period of time. I think, you know, in my coaching experience, what I found, it's probably the third year working with a group of players that they get a real deep understanding of what you're trying to do, you know, and those first couple of years, I suppose it depends on the level that you're working at. Those first couple of years, you'll get some really good highs, you'll get some really great experiences, but then you'll have some, you know, some real bad experiences and you know, lose games heavily, and you're wondering, oh no. But you've got to explain to the players, and as a coaches, we've got to trust the coaching process. We've got to trust this process that we're going through, because we know that, you know, we'll get that point where we can have consistency in our performance, and that consistency in your performance then hopefully leads to more wins and ultimately, you know, a league title, trophies, etc. What you're looking for. You know, and this last little clip here, you know, it's always evolving. It's always coming back to the point, you know, that the players have got to trust the coaches that they can implement the plans and put the stuff in place. You know, coaches and players, you know, you got to trust them that they understand what they're doing. You know, the players have then got to trust their teammates to execute and, you know, under pressure. And then I suppose it's coming back around again. The coaches have got to trust the players, you know, and that's that process through the whole week and through the season and whatever length of time you're working with your team. You know, it's ever evolving, and it's always coming back to point that, you know, the whole thing's built on trust, you know, and respect. You know, from a Harlequins over in the Premiership in rugby, you know, they changed last year their coaches mid-season. You know, and they brought in a fella called Owen Eastwood, who's done a tremendous work with a lot of international teams and club teams and in the pro game and not in the pro game, through a lot of different sports, you know, and you know, he was brought in to try and sort of change their mindset, and you know, and basically his book, Belonging, I think it's called, it goes back to the purpose and the why, and he went through sort of the history of Harlequins and the famous players that had come through the club and what the DNA of the club was, you know, and ultimately they went on and like had an unbelievable second half to the season and actually sneaked the Premiership against Exeter in the end, you know, and you know, listening to him. So I've been very fortunate to listen to him quite a few times, and you know, he speaks so simply about the process of, you know, of changing that culture, and you know, it's you know, it's a great book, and you know, gives you a real understanding what he's about, and you know, and how he, you know, as I suppose, a transformational leader, can change, you know, the success of the club and the foundation and culture of that club. I suppose there's a couple of teams that, you know, and there's maybe a couple of guys on the call here tonight that have actually had a chance to look around Kingspan Stadium. You know, we're talking about culture and Ulster Rugby, and you know, this here's a quote on the wall, and it's from a guy, Sir Wilfred Spender, and it's about the Battle of the Somme, and you know, about the sacrifice, you know, that the soldiers made, and you know, I suppose playing for Ulster and coaching Ulster, you know, it was what it meant to be an Ulsterman, and you know, and so these are the things that, you know, we've based ourselves. Ulster are doing something slightly different now. I'm doing a little bit of work with Campbell College. That's the Campbell College badge, the Indian Stars and medal that was awarded to some war heroes, you know, who went to Campbell College and 2 world wars. All right, so there's the process that I would go through, and you know, it's about it, you know, going back to Owen Eastwood's book, belonging. You know, what's the purpose, and what's the DNA of the club or team that you're working with. And if you look at it, so this is an example of Belfast Harlequins. And it was just a review of what had gone before in the last 5 years of Belfast Harlequins. So we're trying to explain to the players, you know, this is what has happened in the past. Obviously we had a process where we're talking about goals and what we're looking to do, and you know, you can't be afraid of, you know, overemphasizing things like we want to win the league, we want to win promotion, and we want to be the best club in Ulster, you know, but there's a process that you have to go through, and you know, you've got to make the players aware of where they're at, because some of them are a little bit deluded and think they're better than they are, but you know, it's a process that needs to be done, and there needs to be clarity on where the starting point is. You know, so for Belfast Harlequins, for the last 5 years, they played 85 games and won 19. You know, which isn't a great success rate. You know, their biggest loss was 73-5, and they did 2 relegations. You know, and that coaching process, you know, we asked them, how are we perceived, and how do we want to be perceived? You know, and you know, we split them into groups, and I'm sure you've all done something similar, and you know, in your coaching process, and it's trying to, you know, get them to think about what has happened in the past, how they want to move forward, and it's all about buy-in, about the players. You know, some of the stuff that we looked at as well on the evening was, you know, what attributes or traits do the best teams possess? You know, and again, that process of them feeding back, them coming up with the ideas, and you know, trying to put these things, you know, into something meaningful that we could have around the changing room, that we could have around the building, so that when they go past and they can see these things on a daily basis, and what they're building towards. You know, we obviously asked them what success looks like, you know, and you know, they all had different ideas, and you know, and for me, it's about the fundamentals and falling back to that. And what I tried to explain to them, you know, success for us, you know, was consistently doing the small things with effort over an extended period of time. And that's why I said that the process of changing culture and changing mindset, it does take a period of time, you know, and it depends on the level of player. You know, it may take, you know, 18 months, 2 years. It may take a little bit longer, especially if you're on a pathway, you know, like the pathway I'm on at the moment with regards to the academy. You know, I'm working with 16-year-olds, you know, right up to 21-year-olds, and guys that then filter into the senior setup. All right, so it's all about doing those small things, working on their fundamentals, and you know, getting that consistency in their effort. And again, you know, it's not a 1 day thing, you know, and it's a process that you have to go through, you know, and you know, we're trying to explain to them that, you know, every training session and every time that you go to the gym or go to the pitch, you know, you've got to work on these things, and you've got to be prepared to sacrifice. What this leads on to is, you know, what we were looking at, what we needed to win the league, you know, and I'll not go through all the details on that there, but it was just a process to show them what we needed, you know, how we were then going to look at that and what our targets were for the season. And then these are just examples of, what we needed to get points, and this is just a correlation of, the max points for winning the league was one year was 671. And another year, the minimum points is 399. So there's, and then the average is at the end and what we're trying to get to. Another correlation of points scored in position. Trying to explain that to them that, obviously the more points we scored, the better we'd be up the league. And if you look at the NFL, they'll talk about defense wins championships. In the league that Harlequins were playing in, it didn't have the same correlation. All right, so the points conceded, 47% compared to points scored, which had 62% correlation of where you ended up in the league. I think when I went to Worcester, I reviewed the previous 2 years of the Premiership, and as coaches, you're always trying to mine down to simple, it's like the Moneyball effect. You're trying to mine down to some simple aspects of the game that you can pin your hat to, that you can have a real focus at, and hopefully that brings you success. And whenever I reviewed, tries scored in the Premiership and rugby, there was 132 games played in 2 years. 121 games were won by the team who scored the most tries in the game. And I know that sounds really simple, but I felt that, there was quite a defensive mindset in the previous couple of seasons at Worcester. And I just wanted to bring a bit more of a positive outlook that, look, it doesn't really matter how we score tries, but if we score more tries than the opposition, we're going to win 86% of our games. If we win 86% of our games, that's going to put us in a real favourable position to compete at the back end of the season. And it totally boils down to mindsets and how you change that. Points conceded position, and this is just a little bit of a correlation as well. And the points scored, and if you got to a certain level, it came down to, on average, if we scored 23 points at home, we won the game, and 20 points away, we won the game. So it was giving our players a goal within the game, to try and sort of focus on that and get those points on board. And if you look at that middle stat, if we scored 31 points in the game, it gives us an 85% chance of winning the game. And the difference then in the better weather months, there's 28 points scored, and the poor weather, it dropped down to 25. So we were just trying to paint an image and some goals within the games for the players to really stretch themselves to and think about, as the season went on. What we wanted to try and do is look at the big picture, team dynamics, set pieces we talked about earlier on, scrum and line out, opposition 22, which we call red zone, and these were areas that we wanted to try and get an 85% success rate, within the games. And if we had that, that gives us a really good chance of winning games. Anything below 85%, then could boil down to some simple 1 or 2 mistakes that we didn't deliver on. And what we're trying to explain to the players, look, you've been in a comfort zone for the last 5 years. We're going to challenge you now. And we want to take you out of that comfort zone, and I suppose explain to them that we don't want them to find excuses. We're trying to acquire new skills, and we're trying to set new goals for them, and we're trying to get away from that narrow-minded, small circle, and really expand their learning, their understanding, and obviously their commitment to what we were trying to do at the club. That's something that I suppose for me, I'm quite action orientated. It's something that you get the work done. And you get the rest of the players around you to follow you. And we were looking at, and I think, COVID happened and we were lucky enough to try and get a few games in, but, we didn't want any excuses, and we didn't want people to fall back to, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. And, this was the purpose that we were trying to get across to them. And that's an example that I used. Jim Thorpe, who, if you can see in the picture there, he's lost one of his spikes. And you look through that, he went on, won 2 gold medals on that day, and what we were trying to get across to the players was it doesn't matter what's happening around us. We got to stay focused, and we got to make sure that we're on point and what we're trying to achieve and where we're trying to go. From a rugby point of view, and I spoke to Owen, briefly about this, and I suppose about the frameworks that we try and use. These are just simple setups. From a rugby perspective, that we expect the players to have an understanding, and there's a couple of systems there: 1-3-2-2, 1-3-3-1, 2-2-2, and these are frameworks for the forwards. I suppose the teams that I'll coach with will probably look at a 1-3-2-2 setup and a 1-3-3-1 setup, and they will change depending on the opposition that we're playing against. All right, and and then these are just frameworks. These are basic frameworks that I'm looking for our players to understand, and you'll see as we go along here, all the different setups that we're looking to use, and obviously, as I said, it takes a little bit of time to get through all this, and we'll probably work, a month at a time on maybe 2 of the simple frameworks, and then just build those scenarios and build that understanding over a long period of time. These are some tempo plays that when we want to play fast, I'll expect the players all to know the roles and detail around those plays, and that's what the players would get. On their playbook, and so they have an understanding where they're meant to be, and then we will coach through that process, just the cues that they're looking for. I think from my point of view, if the players understand where they're meant to be, then it helps in that process of I can then build those scenarios in, and take bits and pieces out of these plays and really work on that and get their decision making process honed down to a T. These are big picture stuff from a team point of view. Okay, attack, defense, set piece that we would look at. All right, first half of the season. All right, that's just to explain them where we are in the league after 9 games. All right, and these are the bits and pieces so the lineouts from a point of view were 81% successful. And you keep reverting back to we were looking to get to 85% in everything that we do. And they used to just scrums, another aspect. All right, 90%. We were going pretty well from a scrum point of view. But these are all stats that we fall back into to then use within our coaching process through the week, and different aspects of the game. Possession, obviously, when we're in attack, and we were 75% in the first half of the season, and those are just a breakdown, and what we're looking to get to is that 85%. And that was a breakdown of just the teams that we played so far. Red zone, as I talked about, is the opposition 22, and we were only 50%. So this was the area that we tried to focus on at the start of the second half of the season. And lucky enough, the first 3 games, we got it up to 65, 70, and 74, which is a real plus from a coaching perspective, because it was an area that we really focused on, and we got real buy-in from the players. I'll just jump through and get us down defense as well. Okay, so just from a stats point of view, as I said, big picture stuff from the team environment, and then that drove the strategies and the training sessions that we were looking to then progress into, and the areas that we felt we needed to do a little bit of work in. Sometimes as a young coach, you try and cover so many aspects of the game, and you don't really hone in and build a real understanding of a smaller part of the game. before you move on. And a big thing for me is, I will work on big chunks of, the training sessions, and as I said, maybe 2 to 4 weeks on certain areas of the game that I feel will really need to sort of hone down and get real success in, and then I'll move on to the next. But you still got to sort of dip your toe in the water for small aspects of the game, but I'll work on big chunks to try and make sure that I feel that the players have got a real understanding, and that's why that process takes a little bit longer, of getting them a real understanding of what you're trying to do and what you expect from them. As I said, that's a team environment, and I'll just go through some of the process that I had for an interview to go back into working with the Ulster Academy, and they were looking what the backline of the future would be. The area that I would cover is backs and attack. And you'll have seen the technical, tactical, physical, and mental aspects of Gaelic games and all sports that you've had. I think for me, communication is one of those things that the players coming through, I think they really lack. And I've no doubt that some people have got their ideas that modern technology and phones probably play a big part of that. But I think it's for the player to jump from a decent player to a world class and the level that they want to get into in the pro game. Communication it's a massive aspect of the game now, and that little small chat around things, it makes a big difference in the success and of teams. From a positional skills point of view, I was breaking down these individual positions, the 9, 10, the wings, centers, and 15, and what I felt that they needed as core skills of those positions. And then obviously from the back line and back's point of view, we're looking at kicking and goal kicking as being a little bit more specific to certain aspects and certain players. That's just a quick breakdown of what I felt these players that were in the academy. And it just shows you how fluid the process is, because at the time of the interview, which was November, there's actually only 3 players left in the academy: Conor McKee, James Humphreys, and Ben Carson. The rest of the players have actually moved on to a couple of extra teams, or have moved into the senior setups with new contracts. All right, so you can see the process, as I said, can be quite fluid at times. And what I wanted to do was show how the profile of these players, and measure them against world-class performers, and then we could categorize where we see these players sit on the pathway. We can compare these metrics and then obviously involve that in their IDPs, their individual development plans, and then that would lead into some aspects and some training strategies for these individual players along with their team environment. I'll jump to something else. All right, so Michael Lowry, for example. So this profile here, obviously this was done early part of the season. If you look along the top line, all right, it's his number of appearances, his minutes played, and his average minutes and game involvements, and then you come down to sort of what he's done in the game, and his overall success was at 78%, and as I mentioned earlier, from a team environment and an individual environment point of view, you're trying to get an 85% success rate, and that's a marker, that hopefully that will bring a fair amount of success to the game that you're playing. And then along the bottom there in those semicircles, it gives you a breakdown of his core skills, the breakdown, the ruck, tackle success, pass success, dominant carries, and goal kicking success. So you can see that, breakdown and pass success are pretty high. He's going pretty well on that there. And then this potentially could then drive your individual plans, to work on Michael's tackle success, his carries into contact, and then obviously his goal kicking, which is a bit more of a closed skill. And then that's what he's done so far. And then this is Michael compared to the fly halves within the league. And you can then compare. So, if you look down the left here, you got points scored. I don't know whether you can actually see the grey figures. the grey figures show that. I look at passes. So Mikey's only made 11 passes a game compared to other fly halves, which have made nearly 20 passes a game. So you can then actually through these stats, you can then actually compare his success rate compared to the other players, on the pitch and the other players from other teams, and you can then develop the strategies around that, to actually, look at Mikey's development plan and what he needs to work on through the week, and generally, at the moment, for these players, they're working on about a 6-week development plan. So, it's broken up into chunks, so that they have that process and they know they're not focusing on the full gambit of their game. They're maybe working on just one or two certain aspects. They'll obviously, keep working on those other skills and try and emphasize their super strengths. Like Mikey, if you look at the game at the weekend, he got man of the match, and his counter attack capabilities and his lateral movement and his speed are a huge aspect to his success, which has led to him playing for Ireland. And you still want to keep emphasizing his super strengths, but then there's certain aspects of his game that you'll hone in into and try and sort of bring him up to a level of his real strengths. And these are just all the other individual players that will go through, and as I said, you're looking at that team environment initially, and try and get a real understanding of how you want to play the game, and give them real parameters and goals that they can look at as a team. And then you got to mine a little bit deeper and look at that individual then, and it's it drives your strategies, from a team and an individual point of view, and it gives you real parameters. And sometimes you watch games, and think, oh, he's doing well, but then when you go back and look at things a little bit deeper, your perception of things is maybe slightly different to what the reality is. Guys, that takes me through that coaching process, and more than happy to take any questions and try and answer anything that you want to sort of have a chat about through that presentation, or anything outside that.
Neil, I'm just going to jump in there myself and ask one before, or maybe one or two before anybody else gets in. So obviously we've got a few guys on the call here who are maybe involved in senior inter-county teams or like academy squad level, and probably we're in season now where National League is probably just coming to an end in the next few weeks, and then we're kind of going into our peak season, which is like the Ulster Championship. So within a training week, what would you see as an ideal ratio like between your physical, your technical, your tactical, your mental kind of training in a training week? Would it be an even split, 25% each way, or would you say there's a training week would kind of differ in comparison to rugby?
I think from a simple rugby point of view, okay, attack is a little bit more difficult than defense. There's a lot more moving parts in attack, but it also depends on the profile of your team, and I suppose the ethos of what the coach is about. What we'll try to do, from a physical point of view, is we'll try and incorporate small-sided games, conditioned games with the ball to actually get that physical side of things. And I know, some teams use GPS and so forth, to actually measure those bits and pieces. We're quite fortunate at Ulster that that's a big aspect of the training load through the week, and trying to measure all that there. From a pure tactical point of view or technical point of view, because I'm an attack coach, my philosophy would be that, if the other team don't have the ball, they can't score. So I will base, probably a little bit further, maybe, that maybe slightly 65-35 from an attack to defense point of view, but I'll try and incorporate all that skill work and physical side of things within that. you know, and then I suppose it's, you know, from the mental side of things, you know, you're always trying to sort of keep emphasizing what your goals are, and you know, maybe at the, you know, who you're playing at the end of the week, what type of game that may be. Maybe working on past history, and you know, we would use GPS and stats to actually, you know, give us an overview of what the game would look like, you know, from a meters per minute point of view, you know, and how fast the game would be, the ball and play time as well that we would use on that there, and you know, then we would then adjust our training that week to try and replicate what we felt the game would be at the weekend.
Perfect. And just, I know you flicked through his stats there, but if anybody's on the call isn't aware, Nathan Doak will be Neil's son, who's current scrum half for Ulster at the minute. Just out of interest, how much do you think you would attribute? Obviously, you kind of developed from performance at the high performance environment as a player, and your Nathan would have been following in your footsteps coming to games. But how much would you attribute, you know, like his kind of development now into like a high performance environment, based around being with you in those high performance and seeing that progression?
Yeah, no, I think I suppose on reflection, if you ask Nathan, I think he's realized that he was really, really lucky. You know, as a young, I don't know, 8-year-old coming into work with me, you know, and you know, being at the training sessions, you know, working with the kickers at the end of the training sessions, him gathering the balls, kicking them back, and you know, they were ball boys, Cameron and Nathan, you know, two sons at the games, and you know, I think he's probably had osmosis and through his, you know, his time being there and seeing what it's about, and obviously sitting down with myself going through games as I analyze games and him asking me questions, and you know, even from a cricket point of view, and I know it was frustrating for them when they were younger. You know, that they were lucky enough to play Irish 15s 17s cricket, but when they were younger, we just worked on 3 strokes in cricket, and that, and then as they got older, it was building the branches around that. But I wanted to instill in them, like, this is the fundamentals of the game, right? You can work on this and you hone this, and then the rest of it, you can build things around that as time goes on, and as you get a little bit stronger and a little bit more focused on that performance and that understanding of what it actually takes to, you know, to be really successful, and you know, and he's obviously going pretty well at the moment, and you know, he's got a really good understanding of, you know, where he's at, and what he needs to achieve and what he needs to get to.
Brilliant. Wish him all the success in his future too. I'm going to hand it across then to everybody else in the call. So if anybody wants to come in with a question there, you're more than welcome to.
Hi Neil, Gareth Coyle here. Just a quick question.
Hi there.
It's interesting to hear how you're using the stats to focus on a training plan, but how receptive are players to the stats? I would find sometimes, in my experience with taking teams, a lot of players, they just don't really buy into stats as much maybe as what the coaches do,
Yeah.
and that's a factor.
There has been a massive mindset change with regards to the players, if I'm being honest. They're mad keen on their stats. Like, as soon as that game's uploaded, you know, they're straight on to that to look at the detail, and you know, so to be fair, I think there, you know, in the past, there probably wasn't, you know, a real deep understanding. Like, you've got to actually, you know, you've got to refer to the stats, but then you've got to then, you know, go back to the video and the game and actually, you know, sit down and you know, I'll give you an example. Yeah, I'll use Nathan. So if you look at his stats from a point of view, you know, what I then correlated from it was, you know, like, Nathan's made 20 more passes than any other scrum halves in the league. You know, is that based on an Ulster style, or are they keeping the ball more? You know, are they playing a possession-based game? You know, he's scoring 10 more points in a game. Obviously, he's a goal kicker, you know, and you know, he's completing more tackles. You know, are Ulster using him in a more defensive orientated position? You know, and you know, so like I find that, you know, as time has gone on, the players are, you know, a lot more receptive because they've got to take some ownership of how the team plays. You know, so they've got to have a real understanding individually of what they're going to deliver in that process. And is it beneficial to the team goals and the team structure of what they're trying to play to?
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it.
Look, I think we'll leave it there. Neil, very informative. What we'll do then is post the recording into the email thread that was sent out before, so you can get a look at it again if you need, or it might be on the Ulster GAA YouTube channel. Just again, look, I'm going to thank Neil very much for coming on and giving us this insight into his coaching and playing experience. I think we'll all take away something from it, even if it's one or two wee things. And I know there's a lot of high performance based GAA coaching in here at the minute, so hopefully we can have some sort of an impact into what we're doing within our coaching sessions. But Neil, thanks very much again, and very much appreciated for you coming on.
Not a problem. I appreciate it, and thanks very much for having me on.
Okay. Thanks, folks. Thanks for tuning in.